And we are live. Okay. All right, Marquisha, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Really the point of this class normally is to talk about not only the assessments and some stuff you can do with that, but we'll also discuss Respondus and maybe a couple things not to do in assessments that tend to cause issues for people. So let me do that. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen real quick. Okay. So I'm inside of just a pretend course, a sandbox course that I've created. There's really not much in here, but I can show you some of the stuff with the quizzes. So before I dive into the quiz tool, which I could do just here on this app, do you have Respondus? Are you familiar with Respondus? Or is that something that you're even interested in?
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. So we'll talk a bit about that and see if that's something that will help you. So when you mentioned earlier before we started this broadcast that you oftentimes in the past have got your quizzes from other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's actually not a bad way to get a quiz, frankly. It works. Why not, right? Why not utilize it? So, but there's other methods. So one of those is Respondus, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. So first, when you get into your class, to modify a quiz or to access a quiz, if you go to your navigation bar and click Quizzes, this is where you're going to edit and add questions to your quiz. Now, you can create your quiz in the course builder. So if you're building your class, you might actually create your quiz, but it's kind of like just making the shell of your quiz. Then you'll need to come to the quizzes link here to actually get in and really modify it. So for instance, I've made a quiz here, my final exam. I can modify it. Of course, I can grade it and do other things here as well, but I can edit it. That's where I can get in, add questions and things. But I'm going to go ahead and I can also build a quiz from here. The one downside for building a quiz from here is if I build the quiz here, I do have to go into my course builder later and add that link into the content. Otherwise, the students may not see it unless they click quizzes. They won't see it in their normal content browser. So sometimes that can confuse people. So normally when I build a quiz, I actually go to my course builder and figure out which module I want to be in. I'll say like week 2. Well, let's go to a little farther down and maybe have less stuff in it. Maybe not. Anyway, so in week 4, say I wanted a quiz, I can come over here to my add content area, grab a quiz, and just drag and drop it over here and place it wherever I want it to be. Drop it off and give it a name. So I'm in, I think I said week 4, and I am in week 4. So I'm just going to call this W4 quiz, just to make life easy. The description I could put, I don't need to necessarily for a quiz, but you could. You could do a lot of things here if you wanted to. You could actually embed a video or a picture, anything you'd like. You can put in here pretty much. It's pretty open. If I'm grading the quiz, of course, I need to give it a column in the grade book. So I can do that directly from here. So I can just go into my grade book. I'm going to say W4 quiz. I'll just make it match so I can remember what this is later. And make sure my points here match whatever my points will be in my quiz. So depending on how many questions. You can always modify this later, but they should line up to the point value. I'm going to say 100 points. Now I'm using weighted grades, so I also have a weight. So we'll get into that, but that's why there's 2 there. And I'll just make this 100 because I believe this is in its own category. So it's weight. Actually, I'll leave the weight alone. Doesn't really matter. Okay. And I won't modify these other items. That's really not necessary in the grade item, but I'll just go ahead and create. So now I have a gradebook column for my quiz. These things are important to select, actually, this automatic export to grades and allow it to be graded. So normally this automatic grade is for stuff like multiple choice questions, true or false questions, things that the system can grade for you. So that's so if you're doing some that you have to manually grade, you might not want it to do that, or you might even not want it to automatically export to the grades. You might want to wait until you grade them all manually and then push them over. So that depends on what kind of quiz you're giving. And notice it's inactive because I have no questions in this quiz yet. So it'll stay inactive until I get some questions in it. And I'm going to leave it kind of just open. I'm not going to put a visibility date, although I could do so. And I'll say create. So that really just creates the shell for my quiz. And now to edit it, I really need to go to that quizzes link, which they kind of hide in this view. I don't know why. But if I just click on my name of my course here, it takes me back to my homepage, my course homepage. Then I can click on quizzes. So tell me if you have any questions or interjections. I'd be happy to entertain them.
So far, so good.
Okay, perfect. So now I have my new quiz. I'm good. I can just click on it, but if I just click here, I go just make sure I'm in the right area. I'm going to click edit. So now I have a lot more options that I didn't have a minute ago. So that's why I do the editing here, because I can't really do all this from the course builder. So most of this first page under properties I've already kind of gone through, because this is part of that course builder area. Although I could put a few more things in here. You could actually put page headers and footers and things if I wanted to. So there's a lot of options that you may or may not want or need or care to see, actually, but there's a lot of stuff in here. Usually if you see these other options, it's worth looking at them just so you know what's available. I oftentimes, this is not something I would normally use, but there's some options down here. Like for instance, this disable right click. I don't know how effective that is. The whole point behind this was, in somebody's mind, they thought that could control cheating, which to me is a little bit humorous because 99% of the population have a camera phone now. So
Right.
just because they can't right click and say they accept a picture. So I don't think this is an effective method of fixing anything, but if it makes you feel better at night, then do it. And you can disable this. And this actually can cause some issues, frankly, this disable pager and alerts. In the past, this caused some concerns because if a student got stuck in the quiz and wasn't able to finish it, they were locked out of their email. So if something happened technical, their computer went crazy. Normally that's not an issue. It just means they're not getting page. But again, if they have multiple computers or whatever, they can still. So that's, again, not the best method of controlling cheating. There's other ways to do that. All right, let's go back to the top here. So under restrictions, this is where I would make it active, but again, I have to have questions first. But I could make it active here once I have my questions. If I want to start date or an end date, I can give it that here. I can also attach conditions to the quiz if I wanted to, which means you only see this quiz if you've already passed the last quiz, or at least taken the last quiz. So you can do there's a lot of options for that. We won't get really deep into that, but there's a lot of options. If it's something you're interested in, just let me know, and we can talk about it. This is something not to do. Under security options, there's an option to click this Respondus lockdown browser, and my personal opinion of this is I'm not a fan, because 98% of the time, if we're teaching an online class, students are taking this quiz at home. And the lockdown browser, again, isn't necessarily helping anything. It just means that they can't use another browser on that computer while they're taking the quiz, which seems like a novel idea, except there's a lot of technical kind of overhead and headache with that. Oftentimes, students have a problem with a computer making that work. And again, if they have a phone or a grandma or another computer, that's not helping anything anyway. So the only reason I might use that is if I'm in a lab situation on campus and I want to, have like a Proctor Pep exam, I can control it more that way, which makes a little more sense because at least that lab computer you can set up to make sure the Respondus works and all those pieces work. So Respondus has multiple tools. One of them is Lockdown Browser. They also have some other pieces I'll talk about in a minute as far as Quiz Creator and different things.
Yeah, all of my quizzes and exams that I do online are open book, open note, because it's kind of pointless to try to restrict a lot of things when you're not there physically. So for me, it's just most important that they can answer the information versus committing it to memory is not really that important in the courses that I teach.
I totally agree with that. So yeah, a lot of it's just the mentality on how you would teach and how you'd see the quiz, I guess. It's like just different way of looking at quizzing.
It's just hard to get around all the different ways that you can seek the information if you don't know it from memory anyway, so why bother?
Yeah, you're right. No, I totally agree. And we're kind of in a new world, in my opinion. This is off the beaten path, but kind of in a world where, um, in a real life situation, students also have access to all that information they do when they're taking the quiz. So sometimes, I guess it depends what we're trying to teach them. It depends on a lot of things. But
Right.
yeah, anyway, I won't get into that philosophical debate. But all right, the next piece down here, there's some other options. So again, this is not something I'd use unless I'm in a lab situation, but you could also put a password on this, so like a proctor type thing. So until they, right before the quiz, you give them that password, and the password's Frankenstein. They type that in, and then they can take the quiz. But again, if your student's taking this at home, even then it wouldn't necessarily help because they can still text their friend Jim who's going to take the quiz for them. So it's not a huge, again, unless you're in a lab situation. And that's what this IP restriction is for as well. This is strictly just for lab situations. So you're controlling, they have to be in this room to take this quiz, basically. And then you'd have to kind of have your IT team involved so they can give you that information so you know the IP restriction. And these question marks on the side here, they're actually very helpful. Oftentimes they'll give you a little bit more information about what that particular piece is doing or what it's asking you. So if you're confused about something, that's often something you can do to make sure it works. So the things that I would say that you can do more to control cheating than some of the other tools would be stuff like timing. So set a limit on how long the students have. So they don't have all day to go hunting the answers. They need to have some knowledge, or at least know really quickly where to find it, if nothing else. And then again, the time limit really depends on the type of questions and kind of what you're asking. I've heard people say a lot of times 2 minutes per question, depending on if it's a multiple choice or depending on what type of question you're doing. So that's an option. If I'm going to put a time limit, I would probably put enforced. Otherwise, it'll just show they have a late submission, so they can still submit it, but it just shows late if you don't click enforced. And there's also some option as far as how that's submitted. So the normal submission that's how I guess it's normally done would be the case behind that. But you can also have a late limit, like they can only turn it in a few minutes late. And you can also auto-submit the attempt. So which means at the end of that time limit, it's going to submit the attempt form whether done or not. So, and if I was going to do that, I'd put something in that description on the top so the students understand kind of the limitations and or not limitations, but kind of what's being required and how that will be submitted. So if you modify that, maybe worth mentioning that to the students.
So can you explain that use late limit, the middle one again? So
this, if I select that one, because in a normal submission, if I don't enforce the time limit, maybe they ran out of time, they continued to go on and take the quiz, and there's 30 minutes later and they submitted it. On my quiz, it'll just show that it was 30 minutes late. So it gives them a late. Here, I'm actually saying, hey, let's go ahead and just click on this. It'll give us a little better idea. So regardless of the set time limit, if the quiz is submitted after the time limit plus a late time expires, they receive this. Oh, I didn't know they received a 0 score. I misunderstood that. But so the user receives a score of 0 on the quiz. Of course, you can manually grade that to fill, change that if you want to. And that's again if it's not enforced. This is only applies if it's enforced. If the late time is enforced. Does that make sense? It's not something I've seen used a lot, frankly.
I guess what I'm trying to find out is if I set the time limit and I give a grace period, how can I prevent them from continuing to answer questions and submit it? Because I'll give them credit for whatever they completed during the time period, but let's say, how am I to know which questions were answered during the time limit and which
I think I understand that. So if you actually do an enforced time limit, once they're done, it won't. They can submit. They cannot. Let me see if this tells us they can submit, but they cannot answer more questions. It's kind of like a put your pencils down.
Got it.
So once that normal, if they do the normal submission, that's how I've seen it work. And I'm in the say modified submission. I don't think they have. So you enforce the time. Say I have 30 minutes. When 30 minutes up, I can't answer any more questions. I can only submit, and it'll give them a little pop-up saying you're out of time. Just they can only submit the quiz at that point. So then that really doesn't force the time. This just allows the second option down here, which gives them a few more minutes after the time, saying they have 30 minutes and then 5 minutes of wait time.
Okay.
And I don't know for positive, but I think it actually will tell you which ones they answered after the time. But I may be wrong. I know it'll tell you it's late. It'll give you a time, but I'm not positive it'll tell you which questions they answered after the time if you utilize the second one.
Okay.
Does that answer that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So once I'm done with all these pieces here, I go back to the top, attempts. This is another thing I can do. So perhaps I want to give the student more than one try. So depending on why I'm quizzing, maybe I'm quizzing for education, not necessarily for assessment. I can give them unlimited attempts, and then I could utilize a different piece of this of Desire to Learn Course 10 to basically say until you get a certain grade, you can't see something else, or kind of whatever. So you could let them just take it over and over and use it as a teaching tool instead of an assessment tool. And then say the only way you can go on is you have to at least get a C, or you have to get a 70 or whatever. So there's a lot of options that way. So the attempts allowed, you can just give them like, see, you get 2 attempts, and I'll give you the highest attempt, or I'll give you an average of all attempts. So you have some options here. Or you can just give them the last attempt and say, hopefully you did better on the second time than the first time. So if they take it twice, they'd only take it twice if they feel like they can do better. If they're just taking it twice, guessing, they might not take it twice. But anyway, so there's a lot of options there as well. I'll put it back to 1 attempt here for mine. Objectives, if you want to tie this to objectives, you can. This is not something we delve really deep into because the system is still kind of, frankly, in my opinion, still working on getting all those things tied together like they should be. But you can associate different learning objectives right inside the tool. So the submission view, this area basically is what the student sees after submitting. And it kind of tells you what they get to see. Like in my view, it does not show the questions, it doesn't show the statistics, but they can see it immediately. Perhaps I want to change that. Like when they're done taking the quiz, I don't mind if they see the questions and see what they got wrong so they can study. So if I click default view here, this link, I can modify that. So I can also modify the message they get. I can say I do want to show the questions, and I'll even show the answers because the whole point of this is so they'll learn something. Maybe. That's my thought, hopefully, right? I can also show the attempt score, overall attempt score. I could, if I wanted to, show the average of the class. That's an option. And once I'm done here, I'll just click Save. And now that will show me here what I've just done. So you can also do some other reports afterwards as far as informational really for you. I'm not going to get real deep into this, but there's some options here. If you click Add Report, there's some other options, unless you're interested in what that does. I'll go and just click it just for kicks and giggles. But you can generate reports and get a lot of information for your quiz, and when you're done, so that's just an option. I'm in here as an administrator, so you get a few other options down here. Then you probably just have instructor or maybe student. So my last tab here, the layout and questions. So this is, I guess, the most important one, right? To get our questions inside the quiz. So right now I have no questions. To add questions, I'm just going to click Add and Edit. And now I can go ahead and bring in questions. So there's a couple ways to get questions into a quiz. Again, if I click New, I can go ahead and just create questions. I can also create those questions in a random set, if I will, this random section. So if you want your questions to be randomized, you would actually create a random section, and then inside the random section put your questions, so that basically each student has them in a different order. So that's, or only they can also say in a random section you get 10 of the 50, and every student has different number of, different questions, if you will. Just randomizes that. So there's a lot of options for quizzes. I think the most used probably are true and false and multiple choice. They're ones most often used, but there's a lot of different options in here. Some of these I haven't played with a lot even because there's just hardly anybody uses them, but there's a lot of options. So do you have certain types of questions that you think you'll be utilizing in your class?
Yeah, for the online stuff, I typically just stick to true, false, multiple choice.
Okay. So again, just to create one, if I was going to create it in here, say I'll go with a multiple choice, I'll just select multiple choice. Notice where it says title is optional. The reason it says that is because what it will do, if once I give it a question, it'll take, I think, the first 4 words of my question and make that the title. So if that works for you, the reason you might need a title, perhaps if you are making, say, quiz 1 first part of the semester, but you want to perhaps use that same question in your midterm, the title is for you really, so that you can go back and say, oh, I need that question, and then add those to your midterm or to a different test. So you can reuse these questions if you'd like to.
So the title is for me. Do the students see the title?
There's a setting actually that could allow them to see it, so that depends on a little checkbox basically.
Okay.
So they could see the title, but they don't necessarily see the title.
Okay.
Yep. And because I'm inside of the quiz itself making the question, I actually have the option to specify what the question is worth. I can also build this question right inside the question library, which kind of builds the question independent of the quiz. So in that case, it wouldn't necessarily show the point value. I'd add that point value to whatever quiz I happen to add the question to. Hope that wasn't too confusing.
No, but my question is, once I build something in a quiz, is it automatically in the question library for me to use for, like you said, midterm or a final exam question?
That would make the most sense, but not necessarily. So I'll show you kind of what that does and how you can get it in the question library too.
Okay.
So because of that, one thing you could do actually is go to the question library first and just build your questions that you want, or import them first into your question library, and then create your quiz and just add the questions. And I can show you how to do that as well.
Okay.
Because sadly, they don't really tie together as they should, in my opinion, at least, as they should. As they should is a big word, probably. So let's give this a multiple choice. If we make a question here. It's a real vague question. We'll go with that. You can do a lot of stuff in here. You can actually insert images. You could have a link. You could insert a video if you wanted to. So there's a lot of options. Anywhere you see this editor here, this basically HTML editor, you have a lot of options for what you can do. So it's pretty open. So you can give it your question. Again, you can do a description. Actually, why not let me do a description? Thought it would let me do a description. But I wouldn't really need that for this anyway, so it's okay. So if I come down here, now I'm going to give my answers. So the value, so we'll go with, say, blue. We'll give it some options. So the other thing that people do that often will mess them up, frankly, is over here on the value. So oftentimes people see this as the points. So they'll say, well, I want it to be, I want this guy to be happy. I'm going to go with that's a color today. They've just put, well, this question is worth 1 point. But what this is really asking is a weight. So the reason there's a weight is because you might have more than one question or more than one answer that's correct, or that could be given value. This really needs to be, if that's the only correct answer, this could be 100%. Because 100% of the correct answer is this. Basically, does that make sense?
Yep.
And you could do other stuff. Like you could actually say this is worth 100%. Even in this situation where you're only going to allow one, you might say, well, I'll give you half credit for this. I believe it'll let me do that as well, because it'll say if you get this one, it's 100%. If you get this one, it's half credit. I believe it'll let me do that. So let's test that out. This other side here, the feedback side. So you can, especially if you're doing this more as a teaching tool, you can leave some great feedback for each answer. So based on their answer, you can say, that's not right, but if you look on this page in the book, you'll find the correct answer. Or you can give them some kind of hints towards learning in each of these feedback areas. And you can also give a question hint down here or question feedback overall.
Does that feedback appear at the end of the quiz when they submit the quiz, or does it appear after each item before they move on to the next?
At the end of the quiz after they submit.
Okay.
Yep. So when they get the feedback for the quiz itself, so not during the quiz.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And I could do a save and copy, which means I save and then I could basically just tweak the question a little bit and make another one. So it makes a copy of it. Or save a new, which will open up a new question of this question type. Let's just save it. I'm pretty certain. Yep, it lets me. So now I have one new question in my quiz. And this is not in a random section. It's not in a section. It's just there by itself. So if I go back, I'm going to say done editing questions here. And now here's my quiz. If I can go back and to the other area and preview it. This top drop down lets me do some stuff as well. So I could again grade it now, but I'm not ready to take the quiz. But I can also say preview. And this is basically what the students will see. To some degree, they don't see bypass restrictions. This is because I'm an instructor here. And I'll say start quiz. So I just kind of see what it looks like. So here's my lovely one question exam. And if I did say multicolored instead of happy, I should get half credit for this quiz. I mean for this particular question. So I can save that and submit it. So because I'm an instructor, this is not really going to my gradebook. It's not going anywhere because this is just a preview. So although it looks like I could actually show that if I wanted to. You can access preview attempts using the restrict to. Yeah, I think this is actually a new thing because in the past, I don't believe you could actually see your grade. And I believe this is something they've just added not too long back. I may be wrong in that, but I believe that's correct. So if I say submit quiz, and it's giving me this warning, once you submit, you won't be able to return to the quiz. That's fine. So it actually tells me I only got 50% correct. So I got half point, 0.5 out of 1 point. So anyway, so I'll go ahead and close that preview. And let's go back to my quizzes. So I'm going to click quizzes one more time. And now I have my quiz. So I'm going to go back in here again. Let's look at a different method of inputting questions. So under layout and questions, I can still add or edit questions. That's under I need to be now because I have a question. I have a few more options. So include prevent moving backwards through pages if I want to give them the question. Depends how the quiz lays out, but there's a few pieces you can do. The whole paging piece is kind of interesting. And you can also say you only get one question per page, or you could say you have 5 per page, but you can't go backwards. So if you, I don't know why you do that unless you have some questions at the end of your quiz that might answer the first questions. So if you wanted to kind of separate them, so once they got past that, they couldn't go back and change a different answer, you could possibly do that. But I'm going to click on AddEdit Questions here. Okay, and the other option here besides new and adding a question this way would be import. So if I click import, I have a couple options. The import source one, so existing collection would be in my question library. So, or from another exam. If I already have a different exam in there, I can actually just pull it right from that exam. But it may not be in the library, it may just be in that exam. So if I click, say, final exam, I'm not sure I actually have any questions in my final exam. And I'll go to the root. I don't like the way they word this because it seems very, you need to drink Mountain Dew to see it, but that's okay. And this shows, I guess this is actually showing everything, including what I just made, this true and false question I just had. But if you have other questions, you can see all of them, pick whatever question that you'd like. So does that make sense at all, hopefully? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm not going to grab one here because there's really not anything in here. I'll go ahead and cancel that. But that's how I would add questions. So let me go to another area. I'm going to say done editing questions. And if I click on quizzes one more time, it's going to take me back where I can actually get to my question library. So under question library, it doesn't show anything here because I created that question in the quiz, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't automatically associate it. You think it would, but it does not. But I can also in the library say import, And what I really want is to import from a quiz. So I'm just picking the quiz, picking the root of the quiz, and I'm going to selecting what I want to import, and I'll say save. So that'll bring my question from my quiz into my library. Now I can do that both ways, right? I can go into my quiz and import from the library, or vice versa. I really don't know why it doesn't automatically tie them together, but that's just the nature of the system that we play with. So anyway, did that answer the question you had earlier about how the library that matches up? Did that
Yep.
make sense at all? Okay.
I have a question about the import. Some textbooks give instructor resources that
Yep.
have questions. Are there any specific formats that we can import externally if we have quizzes outside?
Yes. Yes, there is. So depending on the book publisher. So the Respondus tool that we have is one option, but oftentimes the book publisher, for instance, McGraw-Hill, Cengage, a lot of those actually have pre-made desire-to-learn format quizzes. So, and if you talk to your book publisher, we're pretty big as far as a user. The whole state of Georgia uses desire-to-learn, so they're pretty good about making sure they have content that fits desire-to-learn. And if they know you're using that book, I know a few of the salespeople because they're always over here talking to me about different ways they can, get their content to work. They'll work with us as far as getting that quiz in the right format. So if you talk to your book rep and say, I'm using Desire-to-Learn, I want to get the quizzes in the right format, they'll oftentimes, usually they'll actually kind of bend over backwards to make it work, but it really depends on the book publisher. But yes, you can get it directly from them. Now, if I was going to do that, I wouldn't import it the way I'm doing here. I would actually click on Edit Course, and I would say Import, Export, Copy Components. And they will give you probably a zip file from your book publisher, and it's really a package just for this. And then I would say Import Components, and I would grab that zip file I got from my book publisher and import it.
Okay.
And that'll bring in those quizzes, or whatever they're importing. They may actually have other content besides just quizzes. They may have, whatever. They may actually have some other content they'll let you import. But that's how that would be done. But yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, very much, I can't talk today, obviously. It's much easier often than creating all your own questions. Of course, sometimes the book publisher quizzes are a little bit of a cluster, and they're not necessarily titled easily to so you know what they are. But that's not a bad option. Any other questions with just the quiz tool itself on how that works? I'd be happy to include them. Okay. The other piece that I'll talk about a little bit is Respondus. So inside of Course Den, there's actually I'm going to go back to my home here. There's actually a course titled, let's see if I can find it. It's right here. It's called Respondus and StudyMate Download Information. And you should be enrolled in it, but you may not be. But if I click on that course, you can see what it is. If you don't see it when you go to let me go back. In your My Courses, if you have what I have, this search for last 10, if you just type Respondus here, you should see it. But if you do not, you also may not have as many courses. You'll have the different tabs. And if one of those tabs might be Student tab, because you probably would just be a student in this class, because it's really just informational. So you click your Student tab to access it. But if not, you could type here, and that'll let you see it. So I'm going to go ahead and go into that course. So the whole point of this course is to give you the download information and the license key and whatnot for it. So if I click on Respondus, it has all my information here, so I can go in and download the product, and as well as some user guides and different pieces on how to use it. But if I click on the Respondus download, this is just an executable file, and then I'll click download, because you might not see that, but that pops up a new little download window, so I can download it. So it's just Respondus 4, and I'll download that and run it. It's pretty simple to install. I think, let me make sure I actually have it on my computer.
I'm sorry, but what is Respondus used for?
No problem. So the point of Respondus, the reason that I see it being used is if you have your questions and your quiz already done in a Word document, Respondus can take that document if you format it a little bit and basically import it into the right format so you can export it into Desire to Learn. So it's
That's
kind of a
exactly what I
go-between.
need. No, because I do have my questions in a Word format, and I've been sort of just cut and pasting them and creating them from scratch. So
Oh, okay.
this is exactly what I need.
Well, perfect then. Let's see. Let me make sure I have it installed. If not, I'll just install it real quick on my machine. We gotta do? Yes, I do. So I'll reshare my screen here in just 1 second. So let me unshare. So when I first open my Respondus, see if it's going to show me. I actually get this. So if you, oh, that's really, really big. I'm sorry. I promise it's not normally that big. It's just the way the screen shares. But you get a small window basically telling you the license, and mine's missing the password because we just updated it. And that's what that course is for that I just showed you. So let me unshare that because that's really huge. Oops. So I'm just going to go into my course. I'll reshare that so I can show you. So I'm going to go into that Respondus course. I'm going to go back to Respondus. And I just need the installation password. So if I click on that, I get the password for it. So I'm just going to copy that. And in that little box that I just showed you, I'll just paste that in there and license it. If it's not installed on your machine, or if it's been installed a long time ago, you may need to just reinstall it, which again you can get from that course. So let me go ahead and share Respondus with you now. So this is Respondus. So once it's open, you may get a little pop-up wanting you to check for updates, which is all fine and good. I'll go ahead and let mine update. It should just take just a second. And it'll check that every once in a while, just make sure it's got the latest updates. It's worth clicking Get Update. It only takes a few minutes, and it will actually, it's going to close this, so I'll have to reshare it, but that's okay. So it'll close out and bring it right back up for us. 1 second. And I'll reshare it with you. And that only does that every once in a while, just kind of make sure you have the latest version. So let me reopen Respondus. Come on, Respondus. My computer's acting funny with me. There we go. It's making sure I'm paying attention to it, I guess. All right, let me reshare. All right, so here's Respondus. So yeah, the whole point of Respondus, again, is just take your Word document, make it so you can use it in Desire to Learn or a different tool. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab my Word document. So that,
Can you make that a little bigger?
oh yeah, certainly, sorry. I sure can. Let me see if I can modify this size so it makes it a little bit easier to see.
That's good.
Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is actually bring in my Word document. So to do that, I'm going to click Import Questions. But I can't just grab my regular Word. I have to tweak my Word document a little bit before I can import it. So it requires a certain kind of formatting. So it's not a big deal, but it does require a certain kind of formatting. So before I try to import, let me show you where you'd find the kind of the file format you need. So up on the very top here under Help, if I click on Help, I get Help Topics. I'm going to click on that. And I'll have to reshare this because it pops up a new window. So let me just go ahead and reshare real quickly so you can see what I'm seeing. So that's what you get, a little pop-up. So I'm actually going to go to Start Menu and Importing Questions to Respondus. They kind of hide it, and there's a lot of information in here. Most of it, in my opinion, you don't really need, but you do need this. So there's Importing Questions to Respondus. This will give you a sample format. So when I come down the side on this other side here, let me make that so you can probably see a little better too. Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a standard format. So it's really walks you through what you need. But if I click on standard format here, it'll show me what I need to do. And there's a couple options for how that's formatted. The basic formatting is the questions need some kind of a separator, and it tells you, I think there's a couple different options, yeah, right here. So either a period or a parenthesis. So that's how it needs to begin. And then it really walks you through pretty well. But the trick, I guess, is I'm telling it the correct answer. So and again, there's two ways to do that. Let me scroll down a little bit so you can see where they do it. So here they are. So one of the ways would be to add this asterisk before the correct answer, which sounds easy enough, but in Word with their auto numbering, sometimes that's a little trickier than it sounds. Sometimes you have to turn off auto numbering to do that, or open it in a different tool, not in Word, which that's an option. But you can also go to the end of your quiz and just basically put an answer sheet. So something like this. So you can just put the answers in a format like that for the correct answers. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So multiple choice don't necessarily require any specification. It's a kind of a default. It knows it's multiple choice. If I utilize some of the other question types, I may need to go in and state what kind of question I'm using so the system knows. But multiple choice and true and false do not need that. This title is an option. You don't have to do this. If you want to title your course different than, say, who determined the exact, like for this particular question, you can give it a title by doing this. Again, that's not necessary. It's not required, but it's an option. And I'll
That's the
scroll down.
title that pops up in the title field.
Yes, that's exactly
Okay.
right. So that becomes the title and course of that question. But otherwise, it'll just utilize the first part of the question. So if you, like, I've seen a lot of people have the same 3 or 4 words is they use it several times. You know, what is the, whatever, they use the same starting to a lot of their questions. If that's the case and they're the same, it'll oftentimes just add a numeral after that as the title. So that may not be effective, but it may not bother you. So, but that's the point behind that. And true and false, again, it's just like the others, but this also shows you a true and false. So it's very much the same as a multiple choice. It's really just a multiple choice with less choices, right? But so if I scroll down a little more, I'm going to show you the other types of questions just in case you decide to use them. So you can do an essay question if I want. You just have to actually say before the question and give it the type. So type E would be an essay question. Again, there's several others matching in different types. So if you decide you want to utilize other kinds, you can do that. You just have to specify in the formatting so that when you import it, it knows what you're importing. You know, short answer, there's a few others, fill in the blank. So again, this gives you all the information so you know how to format your Word document before importing it. Does that all make sense? Kinda? Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out. This is really, in my opinion at least, the most important piece of this help file. I haven't, a lot of this others I don't think you'll really run into that you need, but you certainly need this format to make it work correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'll reshare my Respondus window one more time. So instead of importing, when I don't currently have a file that's all formatted perfectly, I'll just open one they have. But if you run into issues while importing one, just give us a call over here and we'll be happy to walk you through to help you get the formatting correct. What I have seen fix things, if you get in there and format it, it doesn't make sense. It seems like it should work, but it doesn't. Sometimes just saving it as a text file makes life easier. So if I click import questions, you can specify what type of file. Yeah, my Hangout is not actually sharing everything correctly, so it's because these are pop-up windows. So let me see if I can. Oops, that's not it either. Why did it not share that correctly? Yeah, it may just not share that. Let me see if I can just share my whole screen. That might be. Well, no, because then you'll see that'll show the video. You'll see myself twice. Actually, I'll do that anyway. It's okay. So this is what I'm seeing on this other side over here, just so you can. I'll try to make it a little bit bigger. But you get a pop-up, and that's probably not very big, is it? That doesn't necessarily help you, but this option allows you to pick a file type. So one of them is plain text, there's rich text,
Okay.
there's Word document, DOC file, the old type Word document, and also a DOCX, which is the newer version of Microsoft. or a CSV or TAB, like the common limited file, or its own format, a StudyMate class format, which is kind of its own different piece from StudyMate, which is a different part of Respondus. So once you pick the style, again, if it's just in your Word doc, you just select Word doc, you browse for your file, and then give it a name and import them. When you import it, you may, at the bottom down here, if you can see that, you may see some errors or just some warnings. Like if you have matching titles, it may just give you a warning saying, 3 of your things were appended, or the names were changed because they're the same titles. I don't know the exact wording it gives you, but it'll let you know that here. And it'll show each of your questions that are imported in this preview results. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I'm not going to import this. There's actually one in here that I can use. So let me reshare so it's a little easier to see. All right. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to open one because there's some built-in pieces in here. So I'm going to steal one right from the system so you can see it. So once you import it, you'll have it look something like this. You'll be able to see all of your questions, including their title, what type of question they are, the format, and their point value for this particular quiz. So you can also edit these questions if you want to. You can preview them, you can edit them. If I click this little drop down here, click edit, it'll put them in that top window for me. And then I can modify the text, I can modify the title, I could modify the correct answer. I can also change the point value. So all those can, and you can also, if you want to, you could actually use Respondus and build your questions. Maybe I want to add a true and false question. I can also add. This one's actually just would change that if I just like that, because I'm already editing a question, so it would change that. So let me just cancel those changes. But from inside of here, I can just say I want to add a new question. And I could create my quiz in here if I really wanted to. If I was going to create it and it wasn't already in Word, I probably wouldn't do that. I'd just create it inside of Desire to Learn in CourseDen itself.
Right.
That seems to make the most sense to me. Once I have all this in here, it looks correct. I'm going to come across the top. Usually what I recommend using is just go right to Preview and Publish. You can modify the settings that Desire to Learn would see inside of here. I don't necessarily think it's worth it, in my opinion. So I don't do it, but you can check and modify some of those. Normally I'll just import it and then fix the settings inside of CourseDen. So I'm going to click Preview and Publish. I can preview it from here or just publish it. So if I click on Publish, just use this option to publish. I'm going to say Publish. And this will walk you through setting up the connection from Respondus to CourseDen. So you basically they need to talk for that to push across to CourseDen. And it kind of walks you through it. So it's going to say, I want to publish to a single course. And I've already created this. Otherwise, I would have a Add New Server option here. And that Add New Server, I could actually come in and create one. If you get this new server settings, if you've never added one, there's no reason to check for pre-configured. I could just say no here and say next. And again, this is pretty cut and dry as far as how to add it, but I'm going to go to CourseDen itself and copy the address. So
I'm not seeing.
You're not seeing that, are you? Sorry, this is a pop-up. I wonder why that doesn't show. Let's see if I can re-share so you can see that. Sorry, I'm glad you said that. It's the way the system wants to share. It's being a little silly. I'll just share the screen again. I know it's kind of large and my camera's off, but so over on this side, when you click on Publish that I did on top, Review and Publish, you'll get a little pop-up window. Wish I could make that larger. But I don't think I can change the way that, I didn't realize it did that, but it doesn't let me share just the pop-up window for some reason. But again, this is something that we can also walk you through setting it up, and this is something you only have to do one time. So the first time you set this up, you utilize this, and after that, your server will stay there. Basically, this information, it walks you through, open the browser, log into Desire to Learn, you grab and it tells you that right here. So the text itself really walks you through it. So you pull up CourseDen, you copy the URL that's in the window, and you'd paste it right here. So I happen to know what it is, so I'm just going to type it in here. Well, the only reason it does this is because normally in CourseDen it has this slash and it has a whole bunch of gibberish right here. And it just wants this first part. So when you click extract, all it's doing is getting this from all the junk that you paste in there because it doesn't need the rest. Oops. Need to say .edu, but let's try that again. So it just gets the main URL, but you don't have to know that. You can just copy the URL, paste it here, and click extract. It puts what it needs here, and then down here, I know this is really small for you, I'm sorry. On the step 4, it asks for a description. So what you do here is just put in, it's like the reason it asks for a description, you might be teaching at more than one university perhaps. Or using this for more than one reason. So I would just put, say, UWG or something. And then it wants your username for CourseDen. So you type in your username and your password. I could say remember. If I was in my computer, no one else had access to it, you could say remember, but you don't have to. I'm on my own computer, so I'm okay with that. So I'm just going to say remember. And I'm going to say OK. And that takes it back to this other publish wizard. And I really apologize, it's so small. And I'm going to say next. It'll take a minute probably because it's going to connect to CourseDen. And so it'll do its little magic trick here just for a second. So I'll twiddle my thumbs a minute and let it do its thing. Can you tell kind of what it's doing? I know it's really small on your end, but hopefully you can see. Okay. So now I'm choosing my course. So it gives me, my first option is a drop down, and I can pick the course I want to publish to. So I'm going to pick the course. Once I pick it, the other options will change. So now it's reading my course. So see what where I want to put it, kind of. And now under create or replace an assessment, I can either create a new quiz. If I wanted to, maybe I just want to use the questions, and then inside a course, and I'll build a quiz later. I can do that too. So I can come down here and just say create new section in the question library, and I can title that if I wanted to, or I could replace a section if I already had a section in there. And the same thing for quizzes. I can create one or replace one for quiz or self-assessment.
What does that say? Self-assessment, okay.
Yeah, the one that's self-assessment in the middle. And then number 3 is if I modified the settings, I can also apply the settings in there as well. So this doesn't, it's selected, but it doesn't really matter. I didn't change the settings, so it's not really a big deal. And I'm going to say next. So now it's basically just walking through publishing from here directly into my CourseDen class. So when it's done here, I'll open up that CourseDen class and I'll show you kind of what it did. So far, do you have any questions about this? Does this make sense?
No.
Okay.
It does.
It's a pretty useful tool, and once you get the hang of it, the first time you use it, it's a little bit, sometimes the first time you edit your Word document, it might be like, and how to do this? But once you do, you're like, okay, this is okay. It's not so bad. So it's telling me it's completed successfully. I'll just say finish, and it takes me back to the window. So now I'm done basically with Respondus. So let me go ahead and I'll just get rid of Respondus, and I'll reshare my my other Desire to Learn page that I had open. Let's reshare the screen so it's a little bigger so you can see what I'm doing without having to be bionic eyes here. So let me go back to my home and go into that course that I've just added those to. So inside of my class, this is my sandbox I just shared that quiz with. If I go to quizzes, I should now have a magical new quiz. So actually, I imported it to the library, not to the quiz. So I don't have a quiz, but if I go into the library, I do have a new section with these questions.
Okay.
So if I open that section, notice it's like a folder. If I click on that, it'll show me all the sections that I just imported from Respondus. So I kind of like that better because then I can modify it. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
So now if I go back to quizzes, and I say I want to make these part of a quiz. I'll utilize them in this W4 quiz. So let me edit that quiz. And maybe I want them to be randomized. I want them to be randomized. It's actually easier just to put them in the library first, at least it is for me. So I'll put them in the library. Now they're ready for me. I'm going to say add and edit questions. And I'm going to create a new random section. So for them to be randomized, I need to put them in a random section. Not a section, but a random section. So I'm going to say new random section. And I'll just put, it doesn't really matter, but I'll just call it random so I know later. And I don't really need a message or private comments. I can choose whether I want to show the section name. I don't need to, so the word random won't really matter to the students. So there's some other options here. I can insert lines, do a few things. Even give feedback on that section if I wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now I have a place. So now I have a random section. So now before bringing these questions in, I need to go into my random section. And now I'll import those questions from my library. So it's the world history area. Here's my questions. I'm just going to get all of them. And I'm going to say save. So this is, don't let this throw you either, because now I have all my questions in here, but right now I'm picking 0 questions. So I need to pick how many. Maybe reason I did this because I really want 4 of these questions out of all of them, but I want them randomly ordered through all my students. So if I was going to do that, I can just push the number 4 here. And then I can give it a point value per question. So something to be aware of here, notice my type. I have some multiple choice, some true and false, some matching. I have some essay questions, or short answer questions, sorry. So these might be different difficulty levels. These, according to the settings here, they're all the same difficulty. They're all difficulty 1. So I'm not real worried about them being randomized. But if I have some that are like a higher difficulty, and this is you setting it up this way, saying the difficulty, so this may not be accurate depending on if you're paid attention to that setting or not. But you might want to say, I'm going to put my multiple choice questions in one random section and my essay questions in a different random section. So that all my students have the same go at it. I'm not, one of them, one person doesn't get 4 true and false and doesn't get 4 essay questions.
Got it.
Does that make sense? So I just a little caution there in mixing question types in a random order. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to say save. Well, we'll go with like 6 questions here. And I'll say save. So I'll say done editing questions. And now in my new section, there's 6 of 16 being utilized in my test, in my assessment. Plus my other question that's outside of my random section. Everybody gets this question, and then everybody else gets 6 of these 16 questions.
Oh, I like that.
So that's how that pulls
Great
together.
for like a final.
Oh yeah, I think, and this is, again, this is another way to kind of minimize cheating, is just randomize your questions, give them time limits. And if you're pulling from a large data bank, a large question library, it's easier to do that, especially if you have a lot of book publisher questions. It makes this a lot easier. So,
yeah.
So that's kind of the gist of that, and I really like the way that works. So once I'm all done, I'll just say save and close. And now if I want to, I can also go back and preview that question, or that quiz. And I can do that from here as well. This drop down allows me to preview. And wait, before I'm actually done, notice it still says inactive here. So I need to make sure that says active when I'm all finished. So after I add my questions, I do need to go to my edit area and make my quiz active under restrictions. I'm going to click active. And once I have that done, I'm going to save it. I can save and close actually, so I can get back to where I was. And now I'll preview it. Now it's active. Now students could see it if I had students in here to see it. And I'll say start quiz. So, and now my question 2, these are all part of that random section. So, and again, I could have let the students even see a title like randomized questions or whatever if I wanted to. So then I just get those top 6. So, any thoughts, questions, comments, good jokes?
No, but Once again, I learned something that I've been doing the hard way. I found the shorter way to do it. I mean, you just really took, hours of quiz building away because like I said, I have a lot of questions in Word format that I was just cut and paste, cut and paste, cut.
Yeah, that is the hard way. Yeah, I think this is much easier. I mean, it does require a little bit of editing to your document, but I think it's much easier than trying to do copy and paste stuff into your.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, good.
Yippee.
I'm glad I could help. So I think that pretty much covers all we're covering today with quizzes. But so the other thing I'm going to mention for you and anybody who happens to watch this later on YouTube, if those get really bored and go to YouTube and watch me doing this training, we also have some surveys for these. So in the emails that I send out, I believe the link is in there, but there's a link to a feedback form, and we would always love your feedback. So feel free to leave us feedback on that. And I'll try to shoot you an email
Great.
as well, Markeisha, with that link, just so if you get a chance, give us some feedback on how we did. Or how I did, I guess.
Awesome.
But perfect. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm going to end our broadcast now.